Let me welcome tonight's speaker, Byron Smale. Byron is a local historian and author of several books, including Blair County Iron and the Iron Furnaces of the Cove. He has dedicated himself to researching the rise of Blair County's iron industry and how it has shaped our surrounding area here. Tonight, he will share with you all of his research findings on said subject. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I welcome tonight's speaker, Mr. Byron Smale.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you coming out here. I want to first say I'm not a certified historian. I just like history. And if I mess up speaking, bear with me. I'm from Hollidaysburg originally. I was born in Hollidaysburg, born out in a hospital, and I grew up in Hollidaysburg my whole life. And I ended up moving out to the Cove about 13 years ago. I have a landscaping business. I've been doing that for about 22 years. And I just really enjoy history. And over the last 2 years, I wrote 2 books. The first one was The Iron Furnaces of the Cove. And the second one, which was just completed, was the Blair County Iron. And this covers all 16 iron furnaces that were in Blair County. Here's the book we did last year. It was on the Iron Furnaces of the Cove. Here's my family. These are my inspiration for my projects. This is Nathaniel. He's 2. Lucas is 8. Levi is 6. And my wife, Danielle. And how I started out with history is kind of by accident. With running a landscaping business, I can work 90 hours a week and work every day to take care of our customers, and it's hard to get off the job sometimes. And raising 3 boys with my wife, I realized I needed to spend some time with them. And I remember my mom and dad used to take us on adventures, state parks, history, museums when we were kids, and we had an absolute blast. And I said, why don't I try that with our kids? And it's been one of the best things. We go on adventures every weekend, and it's the highlight of my week. And we'll go all over Blair County, Cambria County, Huntington County. We'll go to West Virginia, Maryland, all over the state. And anyone says there's nothing to do around here, there's a ton to do. You can't see it all. So we find something to do every weekend. So this is Nathaniel having fun at Carrick Iron Furnace, and this is in Franklin County, which is really, really cool. And this is at the Glenn White Coke ovens, inspired by Kevin Stiver's book. We went up there and checked out the Coke ovens, and right here is on the C&O Canal Trail in Maryland. That's a canal trail that's really nice. A lot of great history, but that just kind of shows us some stuff we do for fun, and we learn and enjoy history on the way. And this is what started my interest in iron furnaces. My dad said, "Hey, why don't you bring your family up to the Eliza Iron Furnace, and I'll show you." It's up in Cambria County along the Ghost Town Trail in Vintondale. And this is my father. He's 80 years old, and he still loves to come out and do adventures and hike. And this is our first iron furnace we went to. It's a Eliza Iron Furnace, and it's a beautiful stack. And typically, if you come to an iron furnace that's in good shape, this is what it will look like. There will be no structures around it, just the stack of rocks. And I was immediately interested and intrigued on what they did there. I figured it was very busy and lots going on. So I figured, let's go look for some others. This furnace only operated for 3 years, 1846 to 1849. So we would go to Huntington County to the Greenwood Furnace State Park, and we checked out this furnace. Can you guys all hear me? Okay. And this is a beautiful state park in Huntington County called the Greenwood Furnace State Park. What I like about the state is they took this industrial history and created a state park. They have camping, hiking, picnics, a lake. It's just a beautiful park. They have a museum. Just a wonderful place to go check out if you want to learn about the iron industry. It was a neat adventure. This is the Paradise Furnace in Trough Creek. If anyone knows where Trough Creek State Park, it's a beautiful park. A lot of people know it for the ice mine, the swinging bridge, the bouncing rock, the waterfalls. It's a great park, but people don't realize that there was heavy industrial history from the late 1700s all the way to about the around a little bit after the Civil War. And this is the Paradise Iron Furnace. It's in ruins, but it's still standing. In Pennsylvania, there was 231 iron furnaces that operated from 1770s to about 1930s, and they produced iron, pig iron. And in Blair County, the 16 that I researched, there's only 6 still standing in ruins. Other than Allegheny Furnace, it's very well preserved. And Mount Etna would be the closest one that's in pretty good shape. So if you find a site, it's really neat checking out. To understand the iron industry, you have to understand the ingredients that they used. It all starts with iron ore rock. And iron ore rock is rock that has different minerals inside, metal minerals. And in Pennsylvania, iron ore is very common. This area has some of the best iron ore rock in the nation during the 1800s along the Juniata Rivers, the Cove, Blair County, and it's very heavy. And this is iron ore rock. If you pick it up, it's extremely heavy. It's full of iron metals. Here's some brown hematite ore rock. There's 4 or 5 different types of iron ore rock. Around here, magnetite and hematite were the best types of iron ore rock for smelting. You also needed, at the furnace, you needed limestone. Okay, so you had the iron ore and you needed limestone. Limestone would act as a flux when you put it in the furnace. It would pull the impurities out of the iron ore rock. And that would clean that would make sure the liquid iron would come out clean, and the limestone would help do that. So you always need a limestone source, which limestone is very common in Blair County, so there wasn't a shortage of that. Here's a limestone quarry in front of Baker Allegheny Furnace behind the church on Union Avenue. This is one of the old quarries that Eliza Baker used. Another key ingredient to the iron industry is you needed a heat source. Charcoal was the heat source at the time. From about late 1770s to middle 1840s or 1850s, Blair County decimated the timber in this area. When people came to Blair County, it was full of woods and timber. And by about 1840s, the timber was cleared off because they would cut an acre to 4 acres a day to run a blast furnace. And these men you see standing right here at the right here, these men would be called colliers. And there was also tree cutters, so they would cut trees and timbers, and they would haul the timber to these sites, and they would make these charcoal pits. It was very hard work. It was 7 days a week, all the time. They would stack the logs in teepees, and they would take the excavation, the cleared area. They would cover over the logs with leaves, and then they would cover it with dirt, and they would set these charcoal pits on fire, and it would take 15 to 30 days to get charcoal out of one of these pits. They had 2 men would be responsible for up to 12 to 24 charcoal pits at all time. They lived around the pits. They were covered in soot. They were very hard workers. The charcoal industry was incredible, and it's hard to imagine what they did to keep these furnaces running, because these men, if they didn't make the charcoal, these furnaces, they want to be running. So this is a basic diagram of a charcoal blast furnace. You see right in the center here is the main furnace stack, and they were supported by supporting structures. They always built these furnaces beside an embankment or a hillside, because they would build these bridges up here where the men would load by hand iron ore, limestone, and charcoal. Here's the furnace. They would run about 2,500 to 3,000 degrees. Another key ingredient to these sites is you needed running water, and you needed a stream, a creek, or a spring, not a river, because rivers are prone for flooding. They would flood out these iron furnaces. So you needed a water source. They would usually cut a raceway right to the furnace, and they would build a water wheel. And these water wheels would make power. And these water wheels would turn. They would pump bellows. Bellows would create air. The air would go into the pipe, and it would blow on the fire to keep the furnace running hot. Whenever you say charcoal blast or blast furnace, you want to think explosion or extreme heat. That's not the case. Blast of air is why they got blast furnaces. It's the blast of air. Down here, this is where the iron ore would smelt down with the help of the limestone. The gutter man. This is the gutter man. He would work below the furnace, and they would pull this tap, and when it was ready, and the liquid iron would come out into these iron castings. This is always a bed of sand, usually with iron castings, and they got the nickname pig iron because this was a mama pig with the little piglets drinking off of mama. So they kind of nicknamed it pig iron. And this would be the liquid slag. Slag is the waste product after the iron was smelted. Slag can be found all around the furnace sites, around all the industrial sites. Glass-like slag is the waste product of the iron furnaces. If you find this in the woods or along the creeks, this is what is left from the iron making days. It's all really nice colors: green, blue, black. Here's the inner workings of an iron furnace. You would have the furnace stack. This is the bridge where the workers would load. This would be the opening of the furnace where they dump the limestone, the charcoal, and the iron ore. This would be a chimney vent. Notice there's usually insulation here in between the fire and the stone. And there's also brick lining also. Here's the air that blew the fire in. Down here is where the pig iron would come out. And that's basically the inner workings of an iron furnace. This is glass-like slag. You can find it along any industrial site. This is found across from Allegheny Furnace in the creek right across the street. I always like looking for it. It's just neat. Okay, the very first iron furnace in Blair County was Mount Etna. Mount Etna was built in 1809 and it operated until 1872. It was in Catherine Township, right outside of Williamsburg. Typical iron furnaces were coming from Lancaster County, Huntington County, working this way because as America was really booming, it was moving this way towards Pittsburgh. So Mount Etna was built in 1809 by Messrs. Cannon, Stewart, and Moore as a partnership, and they operated until about 1820. The biggest challenges when they made their pig iron was getting it to Pittsburgh. Their main buyer was in Pittsburgh. So they would take pack horses and wagons over the Allegheny Mountains. That would take about 2 weeks. It was a dangerous trip, and that was the early struggles of the iron industry. A lot of the pig iron would be sold locally to markets. Local forges and blacksmiths would sell the products that they would make out of the iron. But Pittsburgh was really growing, so a lot of these furnaces in Blair County were getting Pittsburgh started. Here's a beautiful property. I believe it was an old tenant house or store on Mount Etna. If anyone ever goes out to Mount Etna, take a trip out Mount Etna Road in Catherine Township. It's like a time machine. I believe this was Henry S. Spang's iron furnace. His house, I believe this was his. Henry S. Spang would end up buying Mount Etna in 1820. Henry S. Spang would take Mount Etna and turn it into a full iron-making plantation. What I mean by that is they would take these iron furnaces and really make communities out of them. They would get grist mill, sawmill, distilleries, mercantile stores, forges, blacksmith shops, villages for the worker, the ironmaster's mansion. They had everything they needed, and communities started. That's how Blair County started, was around these blast furnaces. So Henry S. Spang was a very key individual in the iron industry here in Blair County. Why some of the later iron furnaces kind of learned off Henry S. Spang. Henry S. Spang decided to get into the river arcing business. He would river arc iron down the Juniata River to try to get to Pittsburgh quicker. That helped a little bit. Henry S. Spang found lots of success in 1832 when the Pennsylvania Canal came right to Williamsburg at Mount Etna. That would take the pig iron to Pittsburgh in 3 to 4 days. That was a game changer and a very successful reason why Blair County did well in the iron industry. In 1851, Henry S. Spang would die, and Samuel Islet, I believe from Huntington County, would purchase Mount Etna, and they'd run until about 1872. Mount Etna furnace stayed charcoal blast the entire time, very old school, but they did very well. They did 50 tons of iron per week, of iron ore per week. The second furnace in the Cove is Canoe Furnace. This was nicknamed Soap Fat Furnace. The workers that lived at Canoe Furnace would eat fatty bacon, and they complained it tastes like soap fat, so it got the nickname. It was a circular style furnace operated from 1838 to 1848 by Henry S. Spang. He built a second location. It only ran for 10 years. I think the economic decline in his health was the reason why they closed it down. But it's a very beautiful furnace. It was definitely one of my favorite visits to go see. This picture was taken probably in the 30s or the 40s, so keep in mind this is probably 100 years after they closed. This is what it looks like today. It's fallen down, but walking through the old roads, you can kind of visualize by seeing the old map of what it might have looked like. So you got to use your imagination when you come to one of these sites. My 15-year-old cousin Emma Zockrell did artwork for my project. I wanted to see her put these furnaces in color, so she did an amazing job. She painted Canoe Furnace in color. This is where Canoe Furnace is today. This is called Point View. It's a luxury homes that came in after the closing of Canoe Furnace, about 1880s. They started building these really beautiful homes. This is right off of 22 heading towards Ganister. This is Point View Homes. And if you see in front, that's the Juniata River. It was dammed, and that was the race town at the time. It was a lake, and it was a very nice place. And that housing development is still up there. It's really beautiful. You can see they had a big ice they made ice in that big building there, and incredible. A lot of good, fun times. That was kind of the lake back then. They even had steamboats on the Juniata River, if you can imagine that. So, because they had a dam there towards Ganister. The third iron furnace in the cove is the Juniata Furnace. This ran in the 1850s till about the 1870s. This is getting it a little more industrial. This was built by John Neff. John Neff was from Huntington County. Came to Williamsburg, started out as a farmer, got into the grist mill, General Mercantile, got into river arcing, and he decided to strike it rich in the iron industry. The iron industry was the most prosperous business to get into that time. During the 1800s, that was it. Iron industry, forges, blacksmiths. It was the start of the Industrial Revolution. John Neff did very well in Williamsburg. Williamsburg at this time was the most prosperous town in Blair County. They had everything going on in Williamsburg. Because you got to think, everything came from Huntington County, worked to Williamsburg, to Hollidaysburg, to Altoona, and it kind of worked its way out. This is a real picture, a beautiful picture. This is a beautiful painting that Emma did for the book in Keller. You can see the little guy right here with his father probably. This is where Juniata Furnace would have sat today. It was the Martin's gas station in Williamsburg. Really cool. Right along the Juniata River. And it ran over to, there's a gas station somewhere right around here. And there's nothing here. There's no plaques. I'd like to talk to the rails and trails to get a plaque made. But the only thing that they had, the spring that came down from the top of Piney Creek. That spring more or less probably ran the water wheel. It runs constantly. This is John Neff. He built the Juniata Furnace, a very successful early entrepreneur in Williamsburg. This is his house. This is the spring house on Piney Creek. If you know of it, coming in off of Piney Creek in Williamsburg, this is his mansion. Iron Masters always had to have the nicest mansions. They had competed with each other. All these Iron Masters knew each other. They wanted to have the best mansion in town. This is definitely a nice home. So, Springfield Furnace, between Clappertown and Williamsburg. This is the fourth iron furnace in the cove. This was built in 1815 by Daniel and John Royer. The story about the Royers is they're a true masterclass in the iron industry. Captain Samuel Royer fought in the Revolutionary War under George Washington, and at 15, he has his son Daniel come help him fight with him at the Cumberland County Militia. And at Valley Forge, we were getting beat up pretty good by the British, and George Washington and the men were struggling to get food, okay? So Captain Samuel Royer ordered his son, 15, and a slave at the time, to go to their home farm in Five Forks, Pennsylvania, herd their cattle all the way to Valley Forge, and they were successful. And they fed the army, and George Washington had dinner with them. It was just a nice story, and after that, the Royers found success early on, especially Daniel and John, his brother. They were very successful at their early age. Well, they got into the iron industry in Lancaster County, and they decided, hey, let's go start our own. So they came to Blair County and bought this property here between Clappertown and Williamsburg. This is an amazing picture. This is what an early charcoal blast furnace would look like in its time. Right here is a stone blast furnace. In this building would have been the water wheel. The spring is over here. The water wheel, see, it hits this air pipe, blows it on the fire. This is where the gutter man would pull the pig iron out. This is the bridge above where the men would bring their charcoal, their iron ore, and their limestone. And notice the tunnels. They tunneled in the ground. they had dinky tracks, and they brought their iron ore down from the mines. The Royers did everything. They did their limestone mining, their iron ore mining. They did their charcoal. They had 2 forges in Williamsburg, Co Forge and Franklin Forge. They did everything. They did it for 3 generations from 1815 to 1885. So they were very successful, and the village of Springfield became the village of Royer today. So very neat. This is a kind of a picture, probably not sure what year it was, but you can see the water wheel still there, and obviously everything's in ruins. But this is a historic Royer Mansion, which is the only historic site other than the Baker Mansion in Blair County dealing with the iron industry. It's a national historic site, the Royer Mansion. It's a beautiful house, and they have Airbnbs. You can rent it for nights. They have weddings there. It's a very beautiful place to check out. This is Samuel Royer. He'd be 2nd generation, son of Daniel Royer. And then the 3rd generation would continue on and keep running the furnace until it closed. Some of the Royers would end up going, helping out the Peter Schoenberger Cambria Iron Company later 1800s until the early 1900s. So their family was heavily involved in the iron industry. This is a beautiful painting Emma did, one of my favorites. So I just love it. And hiring her to do this artwork was a project because I recognize her talent, and she's amazing. So this is Peter Schoenberger. To understand Peter Schoenberger, he's the Iron King of the iron industry in America. He was the wealthiest iron master in America at the time. He was the Andrew Carnegie of the iron industry. This man had a dozen iron furnaces, well over 100,000 acres. And with his start of his career, his father, George Schoenberger, was a German Hessian soldier, came here to fight against us during the Revolutionary War. Like a lot of German Hessian soldiers, they realized, hey, it's pretty nice here in America. Let's go ahead and stay. So after the war was over, he stayed, and his dad got into the iron industry in Huntington County. He operated the Huntington Iron Furnace and the Union Furnace in Spruce Creek. And Dr. Peter Schoenberger went to the medical school and he completed that. And then he realized, hey, I might as well I might as well follow my father's footsteps and stay in the iron industry. And that was a very good decision. He would operate the 2 Huntington furnaces after his father. And Peter Schoenberger decided, hey, let's set our sights and grow this thing. So he would hire supervisors and iron masters to run his businesses in Huntington. He decided, let's head to Martinsburg. Let's head out to the Cove and get started out there. So in 1817, he built Rebecca Furnace. Rebecca Furnace is in Fredericksburg. If anyone knows where Rebecca Furnace Road is, that's where Rebecca Furnace was. And this picture, I found that Jim Lowell from the Blair County Historical Society gave this to me. But this is probably in the 30s, the 20s or 30s. You can see it's in ruins. This is what it looks like today. It was built along this hillside. It's just a little bit of a different angle. Keep in mind, I always try to figure out where did the stones go? Where did the rocks and the stones go? This is slag. You'll find slag all over the site. If you find slag on the property, you know you're in the right spot. It's somewhere close by. This is Oak Manor. Oak Manor was built by Peter Schoenberger's son-in-law, Edward Lytle, that married his daughter, Elizabeth. And some of the motivation with this book was I found out from a coworker that there was an iron master in the Cove that named all his furnaces after the women in his life, the wife, the daughters, and it became tradition to name their furnaces after your daughters or your wives. And this one's called Rebecca, so it was obviously named after his other daughter, but Elizabeth would move there. So Edward Lytle and Elizabeth built this home. It's beautiful. It's Oak Manor. It's still there. The Hirschbergers own it. They've owned it for about 80 years, and Doris still lives there. It's a beautiful property. She's 97 years old, but it's a beautiful property. Remember I told you about the stones, Rebecca Furnace? I was in a library at Roaring Spring doing some research on the iron industry. I found out where the stones of Rebecca Furnace went. A foundation beside Subway in Martinsburg. This is Rebecca Furnace stone. And when I found out there's a man in Martinsburg named Frank Leidy. I stopped at his house and said, can I go see your basement? And he's like, yeah, come on in. And he had this beautiful rock, and I told him what it was from, Rebecca Furnace, and he just loved it. His family really likes history, so he really appreciated it. So beautiful stone that could move on for generations. And the rest of the stone went to the Martinsburg Sportsman's Club to their fireplace, and that's really neat. Both of these properties were probably built around the 30s and 40s, so it makes sense. The stone, the time frame where it was probably torn down by a contractor and rebuilt. Yeah, definitely. Interesting. This is just, it doesn't look like much, but this is an old ore hole on the Millerstown mines. This is on Millerstown Road in Martinsburg. It's a bunch of trees, but there's a large hole here. It's pretty big. That's where they mine some of their ore rock for Rebecca Furnace. This is a picture of Henrietta. The village of Henrietta in the Cove area was built. They built Henrietta because of the iron industry. They found lots of good veins of iron ore rock. And back then, these people were very smart, and they looked for iron ore. That was what they needed. That was the main ingredient. And Henrietta had this large ore hole, which is right here. And it started around the late 1860s, but would operate until about the 1920s, 1930s. Even though the iron industry in Blair County would close up around 1896, the iron ore mines would continue supplying the steel mills iron ore till about the 30s. So Henrietta really prospered in that time. They had their own railroad. It was a very prosperous community. This is Ore Hill. This is in Taylor Township, and it borders Bedford County. This is one of, we go back to Peter Schoenberger. This is where Peter Schoenberger's struck it rich, was at Ore Hill. This iron ore, which you see right here, this large iron ore, is the best iron ore in Pennsylvania and the nation at the time. The government's contracted with Peter Schoenberger for this iron ore for weapons, and this is the best stuff, and it had the best content. And so Peter Schoenberger owned this entire mining property, and he made lots of money there. So he built furnaces right around Ore Hill, which is present day site of Iron Masters Country Club. This is the 13th, on the 13th green. This is an old ore mine filled in. So they used to mine ore rock. Now they just have to mine golf balls. So here's some old pictures of Ore Hill. Early ore mining was started by pick and shovel on the surface, mules and wagons. As time progressed, they got the steam shovels and the railroad and dinky tracks. Obviously, here it's a little bit later, probably middle of the 1850s. That's probably more like 1870s, but they got pretty aggressive with it, and they had ore holes all over Ore Hill. You didn't just have one hole. You had about 100 more. These old ore mining sites there's ore holes everywhere and underground mine shafts. They started going underground to get iron ore. These men worked incredible. They were very hard working. So not only the furnaces, but the ore mining and the limestone, the making of the charcoal, everyone was involved in this industry. Here's their own railroad. They had their railroad that ran to Ore Hill. And some of these industrial ore mining sites, they all had their own railroad that ran to it. And whenever the industry shut down, they pulled the tracks, and that was it. Here, every large ore mining area had their own ore washer set up and crusher. So these buildings are ore washers. They would wash the iron ore, clean the clay off, and they would crush it to great sizes to deliver to the furnace. And they were doing heavy mining here at this time. So they were sending this out to everywhere. So they had lots of men doing this project. So they'd bring the rail cars in, filled up with iron ore, clean iron ore, and they would sell it all over to anyone that needed to buy it. This is Steam Pump Dam. It's about a mile from Ore Hill. They pump the water using a steam pump about a mile to clean the ore, to use for the water for the ore washers. These people were very smart back then. This is iron ore rock at Ore Hill. You can see it's just, just like this right here. It has lots of nice color. Very heavy. In 1829, Peter Schoenberger would build the Elizabeth Furnace in Woodbury. This site would sit behind Barkman Oil Company in Woodbury. This house up on the hill is John Kaufman. He's a dairy farmer. He's about 90. I didn't have much on Elizabeth Furnace when I started my book. It was off to the publisher for the first copy, and the Herald did an article, and I only had something simple on Elizabeth Furnace. I couldn't find anything on it. And John Kaufman seen the article and said, Byron, do you know anything about Elizabeth Furnace? I said, not much. I said, I need to know more. He said, come out and see me. Come out in about an hour. I live on the property. So I was out there for about 4 or 5 hours that evening. And I did a full chapter on Elizabeth Furnace that night because it was off to the publisher. But the furnace sat right on this hillside. Slag all over the property as a general indicator of an iron furnace. This furnace would be dismantled in 1845, and it'd be rebuilt right below Orr Hill underneath Bloomfield Furnace. Underneath, it'd be called Bloomfield Furnace. Peter Schoenberger, very smart businessman, he realized, why transport all the quality iron ore rock from Orr Hill all the way out to Woodbury? Let's just build it closer. So that's what they did. Slag rock. This is the site of Bloomfield Furnace. If anyone knows where Sproul Mountain is, there's a Bloomfield nursery, but this is the Bloomfield Furnace farm. There are no ruins here other than some small foundation, but I'm actually not sure where the furnace sat. I'm sure I could figure it out, but I got permission from the neighbors to come see this property, and I haven't got a chance to go back and explore, but you can see massive piles of slag here. There's massive piles of slag. Bloomfield would operate from 1845 to 1888, did very well, using, quality ore rock from Orr Hill. There's some slag rock and then some iron ore. Now, Peter Schoenberger would die in 1854. Before he died, he partnered with a man up in Cambria County, in Johnstown area, and another iron master up there, and they formed Cambria Iron Company. Cambria Iron Company would consolidate with lots of ore mining, ore mines and iron furnaces, and they would consolidate and make these iron furnaces. They would just consolidate and make it, larger organizations at the time. Peter Schoenberger would build Martha Furnace in 1838. This sat right in McKee Gap. If anyone knows McKee Gap, everyone knows that. It's the one-way into the cove. Here's the mountain. This sits right at the PennDOT shed in McKee Gap. This was built in 1838 and rebuilt in 1845, and this is where we're going to talk about a shift in the industry. Iron timber was depleted about 1840s and 1850s. There was no more timber. These furnaces, they had no way to heat them. And also the construction boom, the lumbering, the building of America was happening so fast that, they just depleted everything. Coking became very common in the iron industry. They would take coal and they would build coke ovens, and they would take coal and put them in the coke ovens for about 11 to 15 hours at 1,000 to 2,000 degrees, and they would make coke. Coke was a game changer. They didn't have to cut trees anymore. Very less men needed. It burned hotter, more efficient. Everything about it was better, and they didn't have to deplete the wood. So massive coal mines, coke ovens started going all over the place, and coking became very common, and it aided in the iron industry and also into the steel industry. The coking industry was very important with that. So we talked about Mount Etna producing 50 tons of iron ore per week. Martha Furnace did 250 tons per week, just because everything was getting better and better. It was right on the railroad too, so that helped. There's McKee Gap today. You can see the mountain range. So it sat back in here. Here's a beautiful painting. This is coke slag. This is behind Tussey Mountain Mulch, which is right down the street. It's now Terrascape Supply. This is coke slag. It's a lot different than glass slag. With the changing of coke, it changed the way slag would appear in the iron furnaces. It looks like big chunks. They would take it right out of the furnace hot, dump it, and it would form in these big chunks. Coke slag looks like this. More grayish black, sometimes red. Okay, this is the pinnacle of success in the Cove. This is the Rodman Furnace, right around the bend in Taylor Township. This is right around the bend from Martha Furnace. This sat right across the street from New Enterprise Stone and Lime, and right in Roaring Spring. This furnace was massive. They had 2 furnace stacks, 1 and 2, and they produced 300 tons of iron per week. And this was called Rodman after Lieutenant Rodman in the Civil War. This was built in 1862. It only ran until 1871. Their job was strictly to produce quality quality pig iron for the Rodman gun, which they built in foundries in Pittsburgh and other areas. The Rodman gun was a massive naval cannon that they would use along the shorelines for defense. Well, after the Civil War was over, the gun kind of went out. They never even used it during battle, but it was an amazing sight and very impressive. There's the Rodman cannon. You can see it around at some historic sites. I'm not sure. I've never seen it in person, but in 1930, New Enterprise Stone and Lime would buy the present location, and they have a massive stone quarry out there, which I do business with them. We get stone, and right here, their goal is to produce 400 tons of limestone a day. They do thousands of tons of limestone a day, concrete. It's very good business in the community. This is the site where Rodman sat, okay? Right here, against this hillside. You can see an indicator, the coke slag. So they always dumped it pretty close to the furnace. So it's pretty neat. Okay, so that is all the furnaces in the Cove. We'll shift to the rest of Blair County. We'll start in Claysburg. This is Sarah Furnace in Claysburg. Sarah Furnace was built by Peter Schoenberger, the Iron King. And this was one of the less productive ones, but it did operate till 1882. It was built in 1832. This is an Iron Masters, one of the Iron Masters houses appointed by Peter Schoenberger. This is Essington Hammond's house that they built. He would watch over the furnace. There's no ruins here at all. It was completely dismantled, but this is an embankment behind that house down in the woods. And I looked at an old map and I assumed this is where it was because I found lots of iron ore and slag right at the bottom. This site has been heavily used by General Refractories since the early 1900s. They would make silica bricks and for the blast furnaces. So after the iron industry, they would take silica rock off the mountain at Sproul, run it down to dinky tracks, and they would make bricks at the General Refractories building, and that ran until 1859. Just a side note, Blair County would aid in the steel industry. The steel industry would take over the iron industry, but Blair County had lots of good commodities to help the steel industry with Ganister and silica bricks, limestone kilns, and just products to help the steel industry. This is Peter Schoenberger's mansion. This was a mansion. This sits across from the Sproul Sheets, and it's been vacant for a long time, but good news. Sheets bought it. Rudders was going to come in and bulldoze this property, and Sheets stepped in, bought it, and they're going to put $10 million into it starting this fall. They're going to restore it. So it's going to be a beautiful property, really awesome. And they're going to use it for some of their business people coming in for like somewhere to stay. But I think it's awesome. I think it's going to be a great project. Definitely nice for Claysburg because Claysburg really wanted to see this place restored. So this is probably one of my favorite sites in Blair County. This is Bennington Iron Works. It started out in 1846 as a charcoal blast furnace. It would be moved and built up here. Now, this would be a coke blast furnace, and they would build it in the 1860s. And the village of Bennington's incredible because they had coke ovens, they had the iron workers, they had the village workers that built the Glitzen tunnels by hand. If anyone knows where the Glitzen tunnels, they did that by hand and shovel, and they helped build the Altoona Railroad. The village workers of Bennington is definitely a story on itself. But this is a cool picture from probably the 1860s. It's a painting, and it's very well done. I actually used it to reference a lot of my exploring up there. This is on along Sugar Run Road.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone knows the slag pile.
Oh, that's what that is.
It's a slag pile, industrial coke slag, massive.
I always wonder what that was.
Yep. And when I started researching, I was like, what is that? It's not limestone or just some kind of random rock form in the geology of, the area. But I was like, that can't be that, and as I learned, I was like, that's slag. And, but typical charcoal slag was always glass-like, and this is the coke slag. And when I went here, I did my research and found out from a book in 1865 that the furnace sat behind here. I always knew where the coke ovens were. I knew where the the ghost town, the village of Bennington was, the cemetery. You got to go check it out. You can go. It's a nice place to go see. But I found out that the furnace sat behind up here. If you see in the picture, this is the slag pile. Here's the slag pile here. Sugar Run Road, furnace, railroad. This is a extension off the main line. Every furnace had their own way in and out with iron ore and whatever they needed. I think this is the village of Bennington. All these houses, really, really neat. Here's the only picture of Bennington Furnace in 1873. This was found at the Blair County Historical Society. Really awesome. This is a side view, slag pile, furnace, upper building where they load, railroad.
Okay, and then the road is down there.
Yeah, the road would be
On that side.
right here. Here's the ruins at Bennington. The furnace just fell in on itself. So the furnace just tumbled in. But it's really a cool site because when I went there, you can tell people don't know it's there. It's just a really neat exploration. That's one of the funnest things is going and exploring these sites. Go in the fall when there's no snakes. There's a set of coke ovens, which Bennington had probably 100 or 200 coke ovens. Here's the old rail bed behind the furnace. As I'm walking up the hill, I'm seeing all this stuff, referencing the pictures I've seen. This is the old rail bed. All right, this is Allegheny Furnace in Altoona. This was actually built in the second iron furnace in Blair County. It was built in 1811. I hope I get this right, Michael. I hope I do. This guy knows everything on this place, so I might not get everything right. This was built in 1811 by Robert Allison and Andrew Henderson, and they came from, I think, Lancaster County. Is that correct or no?
Yes.
Okay. They would operate this only for 6 or 7 years. And I think the early struggles with the charcoal blast furnaces, the transportation was the main reason why. They did a beautiful job setting up the iron furnace, getting everything ready. And there was no canal, there was no railroad. The transportation, I think, was the main factor. They did a beautiful job getting it started. And they would close it and they would sit idle for till probably 16 years until Eliza Baker would come and buy this property. Here's Eliza Baker. If everyone knows Eliza Baker from Altoona, he was the iron master at Allegheny Furnace. And what I learned about Eliza Baker, he was an incredible businessman, very successful. He formed a lot of partnerships with other people, very business savvy, and he really helped the community. And a lot of people say he had money trouble, but I don't think that was the case. I think the ending times of the iron industry was every iron master had trouble. And Eliza Baker built such a nice business that his family still prospered after he was gone. So here's Allegheny Furnace today. This is what's left, and it's beautiful. His stack would have been a lot higher, but it's a very good condition. And here's what I think it would have been a store or a supply store. And the furnace would have sat here. But if you go back and see the picture of the painting, that's what it would look like. So this is the Baker Mansion, which is Eliza Baker's amazing Iron Master mansion. This is probably the best Iron Master mansion I've ever seen. And his goal was to be the best, I think. He wanted the best mansion. And I have to give a shout out to Timothy C. Van Scoik. He did a really nice book at the Baker Mansion on this mansion. And I did a lot of reading on that. And I would recommend getting that book, going to the Baker Mansion and learning a little bit more about Eliza Baker and the mansion, because that's a story itself. But Emma did this artwork for the mansion, and she did a wonderful job. So this is the pond at Lakemont Park. This was the ore hole for Eliza Baker, one of a few. And after the iron industry, his boy Sylvester Baker, which was another good business owner, he was involved in lots of different businesses. He helped formed the Altoona Trolley Company, Logan Valley Trolley Company. This area was a trolley company, and they built Lakemont Park. So they filled this ore hole in, and it's been the lake ever since. So a lot of people don't realize that that's an ore hole where they mine their ore rock. Right here is an underground mine shaft right beside the ore rock. It's filled in. You can see the opening. It's been filled in. There's 3 of those alongside.
Yeah, they still have some caves out there.
Yeah.
By making them farm.
Yeah, they had a tunnel shaft into the hillside. Supposedly this went all the way to the Logan Valley Mall or Garden Heights out to Plank Road.
I think it was beyond the railroad, the little railroad crossing. Right?
Awesome.
You can see still, at least you could.
Awesome.
When I was younger.
I've heard stories from people like you that they would go through this when they were kids and they seen the old dinky tracks, and so it was pretty neat.
Filled with water.
That's what I heard. Yeah, but that's really neat. Like underground mining was a thing of the past, and it is incredible what they did. Iron ore rock you can be found. I just walked along there, and you could find iron ore rock. This is Eliza Baker's. One of his limestone quarries right behind the church, across the street from Allegheny Furnace. It's great. It sits right below the Altoona Mirror, and this ledge of limestone probably did them well. It was right across the street. It was probably really such a great place for them. And slag found in the river. Eliza Baker was a successful businessman. He bought another furnace up in Indiana County called the Baker Furnace in Kramer, Indiana. I've never personally been there. I think the ruins are still there. I just don't know. But yeah, he reached out and tried to expand his business. And whenever the coking industry came in, it might have been his boys. I think Eliza died in 1866 or 1864. Well, they realized the industry was changing. The coke ovens were the new way to heat the furnaces. So Eliza Baker actually purchased a couple coal mines, and they actually had their own coke ovens. Not sure where they were, but yeah, they were pretty smart business people. They tried to do everything in house. A story about Eliza Baker that I want to share. Their Pleasant Valley Boulevard Plank Road used to be Collinsville Road, and that area used to be so wet and muddy, swampy. And whenever they built the Logan Valley Mall and that road, they did a lot of engineering to revert the water. The reason why it got Plank Road is Eliza Baker, they would cut planks and put them over the roadway. They had a sawmill, and they would cover the road with planks to get their wagons of iron ore, their limestone, their iron ore. Plank Road would become a very good transportation system for not only them, but everyone in the village. So Plank Road got its history from that. So that's pretty neat. This is a mysterious iron furnace called the Blair furnace. It sat over in the East Altoona, the farthest side of Juniata rail shops, right across the bridge across from Sheets in Juniata. Found this old map. Here's Blair furnace. Notice the main line. You'll see this separate rail line, Eliza Baker iron ore mines. He had mines over in East Altoona. I'll show you those too, but they had their own line right to their furnace. And if I go back to Juniata Furnace in Williamsburg, I don't know if I said, but John Neff did very successful because they produced all their pig iron for the Altoona Railroad, the Altoona rail shops. Some of these furnaces sold lots of iron to the rail shops in the building of Altoona, the Horseshoe Curve. They were doing lots of iron for the railroad. Blair furnace sat right along the railroad, so I assume that's who they were selling their iron to. Surprisingly, they didn't do very well. They had 5 owners in the period of time that they were open. They ran from 1845 till 1870, and they just never really did that well for some reason from researching. Here's the general location I think it's at. Going off an old book, here's the bridge. Here's Sheets. 2 blocks up between the second and third, there used to be a tower here. The furnace sat right along the railroad somewhere in here. So I'm thinking this is a spot where the furnace sat. In the book I read from 1865, there's not any slag, no ruins. It's completely built over by the railroad. So there's nothing there that you can see, but other than what you see in a couple of old books. Here's the location today. So it probably sat somewhere right in here. I'm not exactly sure. I'm just kind of using imagination, I guess, but it definitely sat right in here somewhere. Here's where I find a lot of my history on these furnaces. This book was written in 1965, Stone Blast Furnaces in Western Pennsylvania. this guy is completely accurate on everything. Everything I've went to see, he was spot on. So you see the directions. The bridge over the PR rail line. At the end of the bridge, turn right about 2 blocks. There was an old stone tower on the railroad to the right. The Blair furnace stood between this tower and the bridge. The site is now covered with fill. No trace of the furnace remains, not even slag. So it was a little bit disappointing for me. I didn't find any old pictures or anything, but it's still cool to know that there was one there. The Baker's Mines sat in Greenwood. They got their Blair furnace would get all their iron ore rock. This is brown hematite iron ore rock. And Eliza Baker did very well here. This sits behind Mattis Motorsports in Greenwood. There's a second ore hill. There's one in the Cove, and there's an ore hill in Altoona. This is the ore hill of Altoona. Here's Baker's Mine, just one massive open cut. They would start from the top, and they would dig down. And like I said, there was massive ore pits, and they were everywhere. So not just this, but this place is massive if you walk around there. So you can just see it kind of cuts down in there, but this whole area was mined out for iron ore rock. Ore Hill Road. This is right behind Mattis Motorsports.
Behind what?
Behind Mattis Motorsports, a guy that developed this area, I think his name was Simonton Builders from Altoona. He bought a lot of this property and they would build houses. And this ore hill goes right up here and off to the right, but this is the hill. And it's pretty big. It runs, and there's lots of ore holes back in there. If you go back in and look around the houses, you can see back in the woods the old ore holes. Oh, ore holes. I love going into old ore holes and mine shafts and just looking around because the ore mining.
That's by Greenwood, right?
Yep, Greenwood. Yep. Here's the ore washers at Ore Hill. Got these pictures from the Blair County Historical Society. They had their own train tracks. You know, the crushers, the ore washers. These are very good pictures. Here's the ore miners. Pretty awesome. You can see these guys here. Whenever they would dig down from the top, they would continuously lay dinky tracks. As they mine, they would keep running them, and they'd go deeper and deeper. And they would start all the way at the top, and they work their way down. Some of these old ore holes are 100 feet deep, and they go for a very long time. Some more pictures, you know, some of the miners at Ore Hill, Altoona. Okay, we're moving into Bellwood. This is a really neat one. This is the Elizabeth furnace built by Edward Bell. The Bell family ironmasters would build, you know, Bellwood started because of the family. Edward Bell would build this charcoal blast furnace. This sat behind former Ghoulish Nursery along Sabbath Rest Road. The reason it got nicknamed Sabbath Rest Road is Edward Bell's son, Martin and John, would take over the business. Martin Bell developed a way to bank the fire so the workers could rest on Sundays. Sabbath Rest Furnace. These furnaces had to run every day, all day, 7 days a week, all the time to keep that fire hot. They developed a way to bank the fire so the workers could rest. So the nickname Sabbath Rest Road continues on. The road goes right through Pinecroft. And this furnace is still there, but it's in ruins. There it is. It's cool to go see. Here's the top. You can see this development down here. But really cool. It's kind of hidden back in the woods there. But keep in mind the industrial site here and all the villages, communities that was once here. That's in Keller by Emma. And like I said, this picture is probably from the 40s or 50s. So none of the structures remain. Edward Bell, founder of Bellwood. Well, it was named after them. This is the son of Martin Bell, which Martin Bell became a very industrial leader. And I'll go ahead and introduce you to the new hot blast system. I talked earlier about you needed a water source at the furnace to run water. Well, Martin Bell and another ironmaster take credit for the patent. They developed the hot blast system, which would continue on today into the steel industry. The hot blast system, here's his brother John. He was an ironmaster. I'll talk about the hot blast in a second. This is the Bell Mansion in Bellwood, one of the beautiful houses that they had. And this is the Sabbath Rest Inn. It sits along Sabbath Rest Road. It was one of the ironmasters. Here's the hot blast system. Martin Bell, this will be a game changer. And you can see patented in 1940. As with the Coke industry and the new hot blast system, you always needed water to turn a water wheel. So these early ironmasters had to find a site perfect running water, transportation, quality iron ore rock, limestone, charcoal. these guys had to find the best sites to make this work. If they didn't, it'd be a bust. They'd only run for a couple years and they'd be done. Martin Bell developed the hot blast system, which is a boiler recycling system that would recycle the hot steam off the fire. That hot steam would be recycled and create air power. The air power would blow on the fire. So you didn't need a running source of water and transportation issues. Oh, you could build these things anywhere near the best transportation you needed. So this was a game changer in the iron industry at the time, and the steel blast system incorporated this hot blast system. So Martin Bell gets credit for a lot of that, and he was pretty generous from my research. He helped a lot of his fellow iron masters. Didn't really make a whole lot of money on it, but it was very, very interesting. There was a man from Scotland that developed this too, so I'm not sure really if they were copying or what it was, but so here's this patent. This is an interesting site. This is 7 miles north of Tyrone, or heading in Snyder Township. This is the Bald Eagle Furnace. And this was an interesting site. This is the ruins in probably the 60s or 50s. It looked like a circular style furnace, and it was really neat to find this site. And here's the Bald Eagle Creek. This site sat behind the Bald Eagle Fire Company right by Snappy's, right outside Port Matilda. If you go across the street, you'll see the fire company. Right behind the fire company is where Bald Eagle Furnace sat. And I got permission from a family that had a farm across the street. I wouldn't recommend going to there all the time, but I walked up and I introduced myself, told them what I was doing. But this is a beautiful scene. I went there in the wintertime. You got the rhododendrons, hemlocks. But notice the creek, Bald Eagle Creek. Here's the raceway. They dug their own raceway off the creek to run to the water wheel. And here's the road going into Bald Eagle Furnace. The furnace sat over here. Here's the raceway. It's a cut raceway. So the water wheel would be over here somewhere. But like I said, they directed their water to the water wheel. This furnace was opened in 1824 by John Gloniger, and he was a judge, and he had a midlife idea of getting in the iron industry. And he would only run this furnace for a few years, and then he would sell it to the Lion and Shorb Group, which was a very successful partnership in the iron making days. And this furnace would operate till 1865 under the Lion and Shorb Group. Here's the remains of the blast furnace. It's been pushed over. It's just laying all over the hillside. So blue light glass slag, some of my favorite slag I find. It's a really pretty color. You can find it all over the site. This is a really cool site. It's the Pennington ore banks. This is where Bald Eagle Furnace got their iron ore, and I like going to see the mining sites. And this is 4 miles away from Bald Eagle Furnace in Huntington County, Warriors Mark. And I found out where the site was, and I did my homework, went right there, and I was slow in the wintertime, and just went in there, started asking people, found out there was an excavating contractor, and I get along with those guys, so went and talked shop, and then I said, hey, what about this industrial history? Invited me on the property and drove me all around. It was a very fun time. This is some of the ore holes on his property, and I was amazed because there was like a dozen on his property, and then he took me to fellow properties, and there was more than I could count. There was hundreds of them. And I did research, and you could see underground mine shafts everywhere. So they had mine shafts right beside the ore holes. And a lot of these workers, these Irish workers, they were some of the toughest guys, and a lot of them got killed in these accidents. They would flood out, and they had their own railroad here. But this was a fun sight to see. The Pennington Banks in Warriors Mark. Like I said, private property, but if you get permission, they're cool about it. They have lots of, ore holes that filled in, they flooded out, and a lot of people would go swim there and stuff like that if they had permission. There's an old entrance to an underground mine shaft. So I seen an old geological report from 1875 or something like that about the Pennington Banks, and it was incredible reading. And they had a map of all the mine shafts, how deep they went. It was really neat. But this was one of my favorite sites to go see. Brown hematite ore rock is what they had there. It's just a massive vein of iron ore rock. This is Jim Simonton's house. He's the excavating contractor, and he has it in his landscape beds. Beautiful property. Nice guy. All right, we're going to head back towards Hollidaysburg, and we need to understand the success in Hollidaysburg and the interesting history that Hollidaysburg had to offer, and the building of the Juniata Mainline Canal that started in around Harrisburg and ran to Lewistown, then they built a section from Lewistown to Williamsburg, then a section to Williamsburg to Hollidaysburg, and it came to Hollidaysburg in about 1832. And this was one of the key ingredients why Blair County Iron did so well, was a transportation system. Here's a picture of in Lewistown. This is the canal in Lewistown coming here towards Huntington to Hollidaysburg, and you can see the towpath, the canal boats. It was incredible. This canal history is amazing. Here's the old rail bed, the canal bed. There's a really nice park in Lewistown called the Lewistown Narrows Park. You can walk the towpath, see the old lockkeeper's house, the locks. It's just a really nice park. And here's some images from a book from Allegheny Portage Railroad, and like what it looked like during the canal days. Typical, this is probably a forge or foundry right along the canal. Here's the Allegheny Portage Railroad, which connected to the Juniata Canal, which is incredible history. If anyone needs, that's my favorite history in Blair County is the Allegheny Portage Railroad. They would pull the canal boats on rail cars. They would get off at Hollidaysburg Canal Basin, and they would pull them over a series of 10 inclined planes, 6 on our side of the Allegheny Mountains and 4 on the other side of the Allegheny Mountains. The steepest part on our side of Allegheny Mountains, they needed 6 inclines. So they had 6 of these engine pump houses where they pull using steam. They'd pull them up with cables until they developed the Roebling cable. It was a steel iron cable, and they would pull these up. Between the inclines, they would use small steam locomotives. They had 50 of these running on this track from Allegheny Portage, from Canal Basin all the way to Johnstown. Incredible history for a good 20, 25 years until the Altoona the Horseshoe Curve came in, and the main line just completely took them out of business. Here's an old, if anyone knows where the Lemon House is, Allegheny Portage Railroad, this is incline 6. Okay, so it starts at 6 from from Lemon House down to 10 at the bottom of foot of 10. Do I have that right, Jim? Do I have that right? 6 to 10? Yeah. Yep. So the first 4 were in Johnstown, starting at the Staple Bend Tunnel. Here's incline 10 going down to the bottom of foot of 10. They have a beautiful 6 to 10 trail, definitely worth checking out. You can see the old inclines. And just imagine, they cut all this by hand back then. The Allegheny Portage Railroad is an amazing history. Here's a replica of the engine pump house. They had a steam engine, and they would generate power and pull them up the mountain with these ropes. A lot of times the ropes would break, sending the passengers to their death. So the Roebling cable came in, and John Roebling invented the cable, which was a game changer. And he would go on to make the Brooklyn Bridge. Here's an old ruins of engine house number 10. See this old impression? There would have been an engine house here, and incline 1. So there's my family here. This is last winter. We got out of the house and went and seen that. These are the replica of the steam engines. And like I said, they had 40 to 50 of these running at all times. All the flat spots along the Allegheny Portage Railroad, they would hook back up with the steam engines, and they would take them to Johnstown. They would go through the Staple Bend Tunnel, which was the first railroad tunnel built in America. They would come out, last incline down to the Conemaugh Viaduct, go across the Conemaugh Viaduct into the canal, head to Pittsburgh. This is a Staple Bend Tunnel. It's definitely worth checking out. It's a nice bike trail, walking path. Pretty cool. Yeah, I took my kids there. The first 2 miles were great. The last 2 miles, they were miserable. So just keep that in mind. This is an awesome picture. This is 1867, iconic Hollidaysburg. If anyone knows the history of Hollidaysburg, it's incredible. This area of the Juniata Canal, okay, this is probably the U.S. Hotel somewhere in here. Beautiful Hollidaysburg. Notice no trees. They were decimated for the iron industry, okay? This canal system, the Juniata Canal, would come into the canal port, see all the forges and foundries. And at this point, the Allegheny Portage Railroad was no more. It would have been the New Portage Railroad, and the Horseshoe Curve was built. But the reason why the canal is still in operation, they were filling in this canal, but the iron masters had a nice deal with the railroad representatives to keep this canal from Hollisburg to Williamsburg open for an additional 11 years. They needed this for shipping of iron ore rock. While they were building the railroad, they knew if they closed this, they would have been done. So that's a really nice piece of history that when the canal came here, when the railroad came here, started filling this in 1859, they kept this open. Notice here, these are the two blast furnaces in Hollisburg. Gaysport furnace right here. You can see the smoke. This sat where Argonne Cafe is. This is the Beaver Dam branch of the Juniata River. It was dammed. So they would take canal boats in here. McClanahan's were back here. Forges, foundries. This is Chimney Rock's furnace. A lot of people don't realize Chimney Rocks didn't sit up on Chimney Rocks. This is the Chimney Rocks iron furnace. There's a lime kiln up in Chimney Rocks. They did limestone and concrete. But this is the Chimney Rocks iron furnace. Gaysport would operate till 1896, the longest iron furnace in Blair County. The Johnstown flood would actually happen and shut this place down for a couple months because of the Johnstown flood. But at that time, there's maybe one or two furnaces left in Blair County running, and Gaysport ran until 1896. I believe Chimney Rocks is about 1888 or 1890. Martha Furnace would run until 1892, 90 also. But yeah, just a really cool picture. You can see all the busyness of that time. At this time, almost everyone was involved in the iron industry in one way or another. It was very lucrative for Blair County. Close up, Gaysport Furnace, Chimney Rocks. They nicknamed these Hollisburg 1 and 2.
Where would Chimney Rocks be in relationship to that first picture?
The guy is standing on Chimney Rocks.
Oh,
He is an aerial view, and this is what makes it nice. Hollisburg has lots of pictures from Chimney Rocks, and some of the best pictures over time are from Chimney Rocks, and it's cool seeing them every 10, 20 years later, how it evolves with the railroad. But this is definitely a special picture. Chimney Rocks furnace would sit right in Canal Basin Park. So it sat right along here, okay? It's covered over completely. When they closed these two furnaces, they were developing Hollisburg, so they got rid of everything. They covered the slab, they got rid of the ruins. And this is a beautiful park, Canal Basin Park in Hollisburg. Definitely worth a visit. It showcases the amazing history of the Juniata Canal, and it's definitely worth checking out. And walking through this park, you can find slag underneath the grass and everything. Like here, this is coke slag from Chimney Rocks furnace. This is where the Gaysport furnace sat, somewhere right in here. And Chimney Rocks is right up here. Map of Gaysport furnace. And you can see Hollisburg and all the streets. And here's the rail line. And here's Chimney Rocks up here, and here's Gaysport here. Really cool. The Juniata River. And keep in mind, I touched base on the McClanahan Company. The McClanahan Company has been in business for almost 200 years, and they're still in business here in Hollisburg. They have forges and foundries their whole life, and they're still proudly operating right here in Blair County almost 200 years later. They're the only surviving business that was still involved in the iron industry. There was 40 to 50 iron forges and foundries in Blair County that made the iron products. You can find iron ore and slag all over the rail bed because they would take the canal and they take all that slag and they would fill the canal in, and they would build the railroad right over the canal bed. So in Hollisburg, the canal bed is the new railroad. Now going into Juniata Valley Road and along 22, you can see traces of the canal. If you look, you'll see the impression along the road, but most of it was filled in by the train. This is the most modern furnace and the last furnace in Blair County. This is the Frankstown furnace. This was built by Daniel Heilman in 1836, I believe. Went through the charcoal blast phase. Then they rebuilt it to be a coke blast furnace. Check out the hot blast system. That's what a hot blast system. Just there's no need for water at this point. So this was the tallest furnace in Blair County. It was 60 feet, and this sat right where the Frankstown Municipal Building is today, right here. And if you see in the back, that was all Bald Hill limestone quarry. They got all their limestone, and they take dinky tracks down to the furnace, and it's really neat. That's a beautiful painting by Emma, one of my favorites. Notice the rail line here. Here's an 1859 map, the rail line. This is a separate track that, like I said, they ran rail lines to all these industrial sites. Here's a Frankstown furnace, and a really piece of cool information is the Frankstown mines. This sat below Brush Mountain, right below Maplewood Drive and Frankstown Road. Here's Frankstown Road. This place was heavily mined for iron ore rock. There was 6 to 8 iron mine shafts. They all tunneled underground, and they would come out to Godfrey Lane down in here. And I went up and visited this place. I got permission, and all the mines are sealed shut and pushed in, but you can see where they tunneled in. And I did find one hole that was kind of opening up a little bit from erosion, but they mined over millions of tons of iron ore rock, and this would supply multiple furnaces around Blair County, even Cambria County, because Cambria County they didn't have the best iron ore rock, so the Cambria County Iron Company would eventually buy this, and they would mine and sell the iron ore rock all over the county. Here's what an old slope mine would look like. Now this is an entryway to a slope mine. Okay, so back in here, it's pushed shut. But this is what a mine shaft would look like today. They would slope and tunnel into the hillside, and they would go underground. And supposedly this one ran for about a mile. And I do some work for some customers above this, and they built their house 60 years ago. They told me their kids would go down and walk the entire way to Godfrey Lane from this mine shaft. Now, you can't do that now. It's sealed and it's not safe, but they told me that their kids used to go explore through there. So they probably got in trouble. But this is Bald Hill. This is a limestone quarry right off of 22 in Haldesburg. This is one of a few limestone quarries on Bald Hill. This kind of sat up past the Dream up on the hill behind Granis Brothers. And this supplied the limestone for Frankstown Furnace. It's really cool. And that would be everything for the book. And the project was a lot of fun. I really had a good time with it. And I really appreciate your time. So, thank you. So, yes.
Did they see the changes coming with the new way that we're gonna make steel?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Did they know that was kind of?
Yeah, that was the closing of the iron industry, was a Bessemer system. And I don't really understand that system a whole lot. I haven't gotten that far. I researched the iron industry for about the last year and a half. And this,
Like the late 1800s?
yeah, probably 1870s, 1880s. And when the steel industry came in, it just completely changed the game. Yeah, it's a good.
Like, holy cow, in
That-
Pittsburgh, we're doing something.
Yeah, that's a good question, because Johnstown was a pretty big steel town, and everything went to Pittsburgh, and the steel industry was stronger. Angie Carnegie, if you
Yeah,
follow,
Pittsburgh kind of kept it.
yeah,
Pittsburgh too. They didn't share.
no, yeah, the steel industry is incredible, and Andrew Carnegie really, they started tearing down their iron bridges and went to steel, and the steel industry just completely destroyed the iron industry. Iron furnaces would continue in Bedford, Everett, and Saxton, and also like Orbizonia. There was a couple iron furnaces that lasted until the 20s and 30s, but that was very rare. So that kind of outlived itself.
You can kind of see the early ones closed because they used up everything around there.
Yes.
They were only up so long.
Yep.
And the ones that were later, 1860s, 70s, the writing was on the wall.
It was. And it was sad, and that's why I talked about Eliza Baker. A typical story of Eliza Baker, his success from running the furnace they did for long, it helped their family prosper for years. They had a really good real estate company. They sold off property that really built Altoona up today. I mean, around Ruskin Drive, all around, they developed it. I mean, their family continued on success, and I think Hetty, the wife, lived in the mansion until 1900. Somewhere around there. But yeah, so they kept their mansion going. And I think, in that industry, you would survive by trying to move forward. But I did mention that the workers around Blair County would help in the coking industry. And I recommend Kevin Stiver's book. Glenn White talks about the coking industry. He's right here. And that's a really good book. You should definitely check it out. The coking industry would help with the steel industry, and lots of various ore mining in the area would continue into the 20s and 30s. Yeah, parts of it would stay around, like the ore mining, and because Pittsburgh and these other places needed our ore rock and silica brick for the blast furnaces and Ganister rock. So we would help the steel industry for a few more years after that. So
Excuse me,
yes,
is the vein of iron ore comparable to a vein of coal?
that's a great question for like a geologist. I'm learning more about geology, and I'm very interested. But coal mining, obviously, they have lots of veins up the mountain in certain areas of our region. Iron ore was very common down the mountain, like around the Juniata River, Blair County. Then you go up to Cambria County, they had lots of coal, and they had very poor quality iron ore rock. So that's why Eliza Furnace only lasted 3 years. The quality of iron ore rock was very poor. So, but yeah, I'm learning a little bit about geology too. So, thank you.
In Canoe Creek, there are kilns, or what would they?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was talking to James Effinger up there, and he knows a lot about the kilns up there. But that was actually built for the steel industry. They would make lime products for the steel industry. Jim, do you have a take on that?
They were built about 1907. They started. They only lasted a few years. They were built by entrepreneur and businessman John King McClanahan Jr.
Yep.
In cooperation with B.F. Jones. Mr. Jones is also of Jones and Laughlin Steel in Pittsburgh.
Yes.
So they are in cahoots with them basically for about 5 years, and they can't produce limestone fast enough, basically quick lime.
Yeah.
The problem is the Pennsylvania Railroad's transportation costs under President James McRae is exorbitant, and he can't get over that, and basically within probably 10 years, less than 10 years, that will basically go by the wayside. By the way, they will move the operation to Michigan, which the quality is not as good as limestone, but transportation by water is a lot cheaper than
Yeah.
the Pennsylvania Railroad.
Yep. So that's
in a nutshell.
that's a great question. The lime kilns, there's lots of lime kilns happening after the iron industry. A lot of it was industrial lime, then agricultural lime for the farmers. And they also made some other products out of the lime kilns for other people with the lime kilns. So
So that I understand the hot blast, it was just nothing more than the exhaust from the fire.
yes. Yeah, they recycled the steam off the fire. I mean, I don't know how they built them, but it looks pretty high tech. But yeah, it's pretty incredible, and that was a game changer. Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks for being everything. Thank you.